Kicking things off at numero uno is the bot's Tots. Captain's passive ability is that he starts every single run with a unique and exclusive red item, the defensive microbots, which shoot down enemy projectiles shot at the captain. This item is particularly useful against enemies with ranged attacks like Lemurians, Wisps, the Bane of My Existence, the Blind Pests, and whatever these bronze-on looking fools are actually called. And as if having a free red item right off the rip wasn't an advantage enough, defensive microbots don't just apply to Captain, but are also given to each and every drone that is purchased by El Capitan as well. For most survivors, drones are usually relegated to the role as just a good way to spend that extra cheddar that's burning a hole in your pocket at the end of a stage. And although useful in early rounds, just don't really have the lasting power of items since they can be killed rather easily, especially in later stages. For my guy Captain though, with the addition of defensive microbots, building up a drone army becomes a much more viable playstyle, and they are much less likely to get shot down from the sky by those enemies, and also act as Captain's very own personal Iron Dome. To really get this robo-revolution kicked off, make sure to keep those beepers peeled for the spare drone parts red item. This bad Larry grants you Colonel Droman, who will take charge of your robo army, granting all of your drones an additional 50% plus 50% per stack, attack speed, and cooldown reduction. Drones also gain a 10% chance to fire a missile on hit, dealing 300% total damage, so essentially little ATG missiles for each of your drone buddies. And furthermore, drones also gain an automatic chain gun that deals 6 times 100% damage, bouncing to 2 enemies. Pairing this together with the defensive capabilities of the microbots is a certified wombo combo that will have you leading an automaton army that not even Prime Arnold would stand a chance against. To really take this bot brigade to election time social media platform levels, make sure to keep on the lookout for the Empathy Core's yellow boss item, which is dropped by the Solus control unit, which when paired with spare drone parts becomes arguably the most busted item combo in the entire game. And if you really are jonesing to take that blue pill and sign up to chill with your robo overlords, make sure to pick up the backup equipment item, which grants you even more drones. For tip numero dos, we have the Beacon of Hope. Captain's special ability, the Orbital Supply Beacon, allows him to enter into a targeting mode and request a permanent supply beacon which can be called down twice per stage. In total, there are 4 different varieties of these beacons. First being the Healing, which heals Captain and all nearby allies for 10% of their maximum health per second. Next up is the Shocking, which creates a radius and periodically shocks and immobilizes nearby enemies. The Resupply Beacon grants an instant recharge of your equipment 3 times per beacon. And finally, the Hacking Beacon, which hacks all nearby purchasables, including chests, drones, and shrines, making them cost 0 buckaroos after a set duration of time, depending on the initial cost. One thing to note is that Captain gets 2 beacons per stage, and this can be any mix and match combo you desire. But keep in mind that once you lock in your loadout in the start screen, you are limited to whatever you chose for the rest of your run. Regardless of which beacons you choose though, there are a couple of features that are shared amongst all 4 varieties. First off, when the beacon is called in and dropped, it deals 2,000% damage to any enemy it lands on. Keep in mind though, if you are trying to drop these bad boys on some unsuspecting Petricorian plebes, that there is a few seconds delay between calling it in and it actually landing on the terrain. Another thing to know is that when you are in targeting mode, you can cancel out of it without dropping any of your beacons simply by sprinting. Lastly, this is a rather niche little tip, but it is extremely useful on Captain due to his high damage utility skills synergizing so well with the bands. So if you are fortunate enough to find yourself on abandoned aqueducts for stage 2, it's your lucky day, my friend, since Capitan is one of the few survivors where he can easily activate the pressure plates solo dolo without having to resort to a life of crime and rolling pot. So definitely make sure to save up one of your beacons whenever you're on this stage in order to snag yourself a free Runald and Kajaro's band. Coming in at tip numero 3 is the Zapp Brannigan. Captain's default utility skill, the Orbital Probe, allows Captain to once again enter into a targeting mode and request up to 3 orbital probes from the UES Safe Travels. These rain down from the sky and deal 1000% damage each to any of those unfortunate peeps that find themselves in the blast radius. This skill is definitely Captain's bread and butter for outputting some meaty damage numbers, especially on easy to target larger boss enemies. It also pairs up perfectly with the bands, which now, if you were paying attention and had your notepad out during tip numero 3, you have an easy cheesy way to get them for free every time you are blessed with that stage 2 aqueducts. To really start endangering the local alien population more than a 25-star general of the Democratic Order of Planets, make sure to complete this band orbital probe combo with the double shock beacons for the full Zapp Brannigan build. By popping these bad boys down in the vicinity, especially during the teleporter bubble event thing, you will be setting up your own electric avenue which will completely immobilize swarms of enemies, allowing you to take your time and line up your shots so that the UES Safe Travels can drop the greatest red three-peat since Michael Jordan in the Chicago Bulls back in the 90s. To take this strat to the stratosphere, make sure to pick up the Crowbar White item, which increases damage done to enemies above 90% health by 75%. Also keep on the lookout for the Primordial Cube equipment item, which creates a black hole concentrating all the enemies into one spot so that you can deal more psychological damage to the Petricorian population than a 2009 MW2 Rust lobby hearing the old AC-130 inbound. Tip numero 4 is the El Diablo con Queso. What's fantastic about the Zapp Brannigan strat is that it not only works for Captain's default utility skill, but works equally well, if not even better, with the most fun alternate in the game, the OGM 72 Diablo Strike. This Bad Larry gives Captain the green light to violate the Geneva Conventions and push the UES Safe Travels big red button to call in a kinetic strike, which after 20 seconds lands and deals 40,000% damage to all characters. The only other downside to this ability other than the friendly fire is that it has the longest ability cooldown in the game at 40 seconds and is notoriously difficult to land on moving enemies, which is why you most definitely want to pair this with the Zapp Brannigan strat and the shock beacons to absolutely nuke teleporter boss events and tanky enemy hordes. To take the Diablo strike to the next level and amass an imaginary WMD stockpile on your computer that would have George W. Bush invading your hard drive, then keep on the lookout for the Hardlight Afterburner. This red item grants an additional 2 charges of your utility skill, and combining this with the Bandolier green item, which grants a chance for enemies to drop an ammo pack that instantly resets all cooldowns, or the Alien Head red item, which decreases all ability cooldowns by 25%, and you will be well on your way to dropping more bombs than an Amy Schumer Netflix special. To utilize El Diablo to its utmost potential and achieve arguably the greatest boss cheese sequence in the game, get your notepad out. Part 1 is the Diablo pillar skip. By lining yourself up at this specific spot on commencement and calling in your Diablo strike, you can launch yourself to the Moonrise Kingdom and hit Mithrix with the surprise early arrival. It's important to know that this can and will immediately end your run short if you don't have one-shot protection, which is indicated by this little marking on your health bar and happens when you are above 90% health. Part 2 of the El Diablo con Queso is once you get up to the arena itself, you can straight up cheese phase 1 of the Mithrix fight with a free Diablo strike right off the rip. Before getting close enough to actually start the boss encounter, make sure to call in the Diablo strike on the middle orb where Mithrix spawns in, and then what you want to do is wait 10 seconds. You can either use your cooldown timer or the in-game clock as a reference point, and then as soon as that 10th second elapses, step forward and start the encounter so that Mithrix spawns in and immediately finds out what it feels like to be featured on the Hydraulic Press YouTube channel. Regardless of items, dropping a fat 40k damage is definitely going to chunk a good bit of his health, and if you are fortunate enough to have picked up a crowbar and some bands along the way, there's a pretty good chance that you will be one-shotting and skipping this phase entirely. Although slightly more difficult to time, you can help Mithrix with a second serving of the El Diablo con Queso and cheese phase 3 as well. This is done by leaving a single enemy alive at low health in phase 2, calling in the Diablo strike at the middle of the arena once again, and then waiting 13 seconds before finishing off the final enemy and have Mithrix drop in only to get smushed into the ground so bad he'll be looking like a Diglett. And as mentioned before, if you are fortunate enough to have the bands and crowbar, you can straight up end phase 3 before the pizza party even gets started. One other thing to note is that if you have the Kajaro's band, the red flame tornado one in particular, and one-shot him in phase 3, you'll also be cutting short his phase 4 item swiping phase faster than a Latina girl with a talking backpack. Yum, 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 delicious. For tip numero 5, we have the Hacker Pro. Undoubtedly, one of Captain's most useful abilities is the Hacking Beacon variant of his secondary. These bad Larrys hack all nearby purchasables including chests, drones, and shrines, reducing the cost to 0 after a set duration of time. This is a great choice, especially when trying to play fast, as it makes looting up significantly faster, especially in the early stages. The key to maximizing the potential of these hacking beacons is using them to buy the most expensive purchasables on the stage, getting the most bang for your buck. So first on the priority list is using them to hack the chance shrines, as you will get the 2 items for free without having to take that trip to the casino. Next up are the big chests, which are more expensive and give you a guaranteed green item, and then finally you want to look for any possible chests that are in close vicinity where you could hack multiple at the same time. Of course, the best thing to use your hacking beacon on is the legendary chest, which guarantees a red item. However, these are particularly rare to just spawn in randomly. The exception to this rule, though, is if you find yourself on either Stage 4 Abyssal Depths or the Sundered Grove, which each have a guaranteed red chest spawn. These legendary chest spawn locations are signified by these pink glowing mushrooms on Sundered Grove, which can occur at the following locations, or if you are on Abyssal Depths, it will always spawn in underneath this rock cave here. So if you find yourself rolling up to these stages with the hacking beacons equipped, make sure to snag yourself a free red item. And now time for a quick little bonus tip, ground control to Captain Tom. This is another niche tip, but you should know that all of Captain's abilities that require the UES safe travels to be in contact, such as the orbital probe and orbital beacon, are deactivated completely when in any of the hidden realms. So this includes the Bulwarks Ambry, the Void Fields, the Voidling Arena, and the Gilded Coast, to name a few. So be aware of this when visiting these areas as Capitan, because he is facing a major nerf every time he steps into one of these hidden realms. And lastly, this is your captain speaking. These are the best items which I recommend looking out for when playing as captain, since they synergize well with his kit. Kicking things off with the white items, we have the crowbar, of course. As mentioned earlier, it just synergizes so well with his orbital strikes and is a must-have when playing as captain. Next up is the backup mag, which provides an additional charge for every stack for your secondary, and it's just good to have more of this shocking secondary in tow so you can whip it out when needed, especially against the stone golems and beetle guards. The Soldier Syringe and Mocha Joka are great as well because the attack speed scaling for his primary is really helpful since it's kind of slow charging to begin with, and being able to pull off this attack quicker is just a huge bonus. And finally, probably the most important of the white items for Capitan is the energy drink and Paul's Goat Hoof. Since Captain doesn't really have any mobility skills, it is absolutely necessary for him to have these movement speed items in order to stand a chance. So keep your eyes peeled for these pronto. Moving on to the green items, of course, we've got the bands. I've talked this to death, but these are absolutely cracked on Captain and is probably one of the best pairings in the entire game when matched up with the Diablo Strike. And just how the mobility items are some of the best white items, there's no difference in the green category either, because the Hopu Feather and Wax Quill are invaluable since Captain once again has very little default mobility. So picking up some of these bad Larrys is a huge bonus and makes up for that lack of kit. Of course, we've got the Holy Trinity of the Proc Chain, the Will-o'-the-Wisp, ATG, and Ukulele, which are busted on everybody, and Captain is no exception. And as mentioned before, the Bandolier is broken as well, especially when using Diablo Strike, because if you find one of these ammo packs dropped by enemies, it instantly resets the cooldown, which is absolutely massive for the Diablo Strike and its 40-second wait. For void items, the Lysate Cell is a great pickup since it grants an additional charge of your special, meaning you get extra beacons. For red items, the Hardlight Afterburner and its additional 2 charges to your utility is hard to beat since you can just rain down that firestorm. And as mentioned earlier, if you really want that Bot Brigade build, then keep an eye out for the spare drone parts, which is absolutely cracked when in combination with the Empathy Core's boss item. Finally, for equipment, the Primordial Cube is great for stacking all the enemies in one spot for your orbital strikes. And of course, I've got to mention the Crowdfunder and Royal Capacitor, which are the 2 most busted equipments in the entire game. Good on everybody, and Captain is no exception. Anyways, that's pretty much it. Let me know if I missed anything and any of your Captain tips down below. Thanks for tuning on in, and we'll catch you next time. Adios, amigos.